Hello, folks. This is your ticker guy coming at you from wonderful Niceville in Florida. At least for the time being, anyway. We'll see how long Florida continues to hold its allure for me. The answer is probably not for very much longer. I haven't done video and audio format broadcasts in quite a while, other than as a guest on other people's shows. Those of you that used to follow me know that I used to do a ticker video that was mostly trading focused, but occasionally politically focused. And that was back in the time of the crash. And then there were some other long form programs that I did, mostly when I was doing presentations to groups, and I'd record the video and audio and put them up on YouTube. So, decided that maybe foraying back into that with some of the nice studio equipment that I have here would be a good idea. I didn't want to, nor am I probably going to in the future, take the time to set the video studio stuff up for other than interviews. It's actually quite a significant pain in the butt to do. But the audio stuff's easier, and actually I get better sound quality. So that's just because a nice boom mic with a pop filter in front of it and all that good stuff looks like hell if you're shooting video of your face at the same time. If you're not worried about how things look, then not so much. And it's just kind of how it works. So normally when you're doing a video shoot, you have a lapel mic on, or if you've got a crew, there may be a boom mic over the top of you, but that means you have to have a crew, right? Anyway, enough of the technical stuff. Let's get into what I wanted to talk about today. And first off, I don't know if I'm going to be drinking coffee here or adult beverage shots by the time we get done with this. You guys can put some votes in this in the comments of the ticker, or if you want, maybe I'll turn them on YouTube. Probably not. And tell me whether or not you think it should be espresso or it should be liquor. For the time being, I think I'm going to drink the espresso while I'm talking to you. Getting drunk probably not such a great idea while trying to do this. So, those of you that have been following the ticker know that there's been some stuff that I've put up about running for president and a platform, which is really kind of the expository purpose of it, is to put the platform out there. And I want to talk specifically about this situation that we have going on right now with negative interest rates and in the ultra low interest rate environment that we have in the country today. I don't know how much of this I'm going to get into and how wonky I'll get, because I really haven't put a script together. So I'm not reading off a teleprompter, folks. If you're wondering if there's a teleprompter back here with all of this on a screen, the answer is no. This is all stream of consciousness. Don't be too surprised if I make mistakes. While I can edit this, I'm going to do my level best not to, for both this and future broadcasts of this type. Other than obvious screw-ups, in which that might be a different story. All right, so let's talk about the Fed's mandate is for stable prices and maximum employment. Okay, that is what the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 actually says, and then there's a third mandate there, which is moderate long-term interest rates. That one nobody ever pays any attention to. A 10-year Treasury rate of 1.462 is not moderate. It is extraordinarily low, folks. That's not moderate at all. Neither is a 30-year T-bond down somewhere around 2%. That's not moderate either. So, and in addition, stable has a definition. If you look it up in the English language, it's unchanging. And yet, there is no such thing. Not only that, but the inflation numbers are ridiculously understated. Just as one example, if you look at the CPI index, it says that new vehicles have an index value of about 146. I'd have to look and see if it's changed in the last couple of reports. I'm sure it has. And the base year is 1982. So if you look at 1982 and what a GM 1500, that is a half-ton pickup truck, cost 1982, you'd find that that's about $8,000, roughly. So 146%, about, call it 150 for grins and giggles, right? 150% of that would be about $12,000. And yet, of course, there are no $12,000 brand new half-ton pickup trucks from anybody. What the government agencies will tell you is that the reason for this is what's called hedonic adjustment. In other words, the pickup truck today is better than the one that was made in the 1980s, and therefore we don't have to count that. But there's another problem with the Fed mandate, and that is that the Fed mandate is inherently fraudulent. And the reason is this. Stable prices is actually inflation. And you think about this for a minute. When humans were originally roaming the earth, we didn't have anything in the way of industry. We gathered food. We gathered nuts and seeds and berries and things like this. And we hunted animals originally with our bare hands. And then, of course, not too long after that, humans figured out that, hey, we could take a sharp rock and lash it onto a stick and make a spear out of it. And that, of course, helped. And then we went even further. And now, if you want to go hunting for Bambi, you can pick up a rifle, go out in the woods, and hunt Bambi, and kill Bambi from a couple hundred yards away, which makes it quite a bit easier. If you had to actually tackle Bambi and wring its neck, even if you had a knife in your hand and you did it the old-fashioned way, it would be a whole different contest. You'd have to actually be able to get close enough to be able to tackle Bambi. Bambi, by the way, is faster than you are, at least over short distances. So the means by which we do this, of course, has changed. We also, in order to produce agriculture, the seminal development for the production of agriculture was the plow. Because the plow made it possible to lay furrows, turn over soil, break it up, and consistently plant seeds at a given depth in soil. And, of course, not too long after that, we figured out that if you took a beast, an ox, a donkey, a horse, and you harnessed that thing and tied the plow to that and walked behind it and guided it, that you could do the work of 10 men. Of course, now we have mechanization, we have machines, farm tractors and things like this, combines. We now do the work of hundreds of men with one. This, by the way, is called productivity. The same thing's true for everything else. If you wanted to heat your house, it used to be that first off, you didn't have a house. You had a shack if you were lucky, or a cave if you weren't. And you had to go find something that would burn, figure out how to get it lit and keep it lit. And it was the direct and indirect radiant heat that provided that comfort. Today, you go out and you turn a dial on your thermostat, or you flip a switch. Lights come on, heat is delivered. In the summertime, if it's too hot, you turn on the switch the other way, and cooling is delivered. Air conditioning, which, by the way, made the area that I live in today one of the most populous in the United States. Prior to the invention of air conditioning, not so much. So we have the definition of productivity, by the way, is very simple. It's doing more with less. So why is all of this such a problem with low interest rates? Well, capitalism, and here's the punchline, folks. I'm sorry it's taken 9 minutes to get into this, but it is what it is. Capitalism is not, as commonly thought, the idea of starting a business, providing a good or service to the community, and thereby becoming rich. This is what everybody likes to think. That's very, very simplistic. It's overly simplistic, and it omits a number of things. When I set up MCSNet as an internet company to provide internet access to the public, I literally did so in the closet of my rented apartment. That's not a joke, folks. It really was. It was a hand-built PC running Dell System 5R4 Unix with a handful of modems on an 8-port board that plugged into that machine. Those modems were the old style that you used to buy that had little power wall warts. And then I had to harass the phone company to bring in 8 individual phone lines. And this ran in my closet, threatened to overheat all the time because, of course, computers in confined spaces close the closet door, and you got this little problem. It's called there's no air circulation. Now, in the wintertime in Chicago, that's not such a big deal because it's plenty cold, and you can just open a window. In the summertime, on the other hand, it's a little bit bigger deal, and there's not a lot of air circulation in the closet anyway. So what came next is box fan. $20 box fan from the local store, pointed at the computer and the modems and run it, and that solved the overheating problem. Okay, so you say, well, what's that got to do with capitalism and what you're talking about, Carl? And the answer is very simple. If I believed that the cost of providing that service to people was going to be gated by the purchase of those computers in that configuration, that size, and the operating system, which, by the way, wasn't free. I had to pay for it. Now we have free versions of Unix running all over the place. In fact, shortly after that, we got one. It's called FreeBSD, which is the one that I use for a lot of my stuff today. Later version, of course. And if I believed that modems were going to continue to be something that you paid $250, $300, $400 each for, and you had to stack on a shelf, and that was forever going to be the state of the world, and that I was going to have to buy a 56K line from UUNet, which is by the way, what I put in originally to provide this service, and that was all the speed that we were going to be able to get. 56 kilobits. There were going to be no T1s. There were going to be no T3s. There was going to be no cable modem servers, and none of those things were going to ever exist. I never would have done it. Now think about that for a minute, folks. I never would have done it. At all. Because there'd be no reason to do it. I could make a little bit of money. And I did make a little bit of money. But I never make a lot of money. Ever. The only reason I think I can make a lot of money is because I expected productivity was going to improve. That is, I was going to be able to do more with less. That's the definition of productivity, folks. You can do more with less. And in a market, productivity allows you to outrun the cost of service while price goes down. And this means more people can buy the things that you produce. It means your margins, if you are smart and can stay ahead on the productivity curve, means margins improve. With improving margins comes more profit. With more original gross profit, when you start, you can hire more people, you can get a bigger space, you can make investment in property, plant, and equipment, and, of course, labor. And from all of this, as this continues to compound and productivity continues to improve, you make even more money. So you start out with a few $1,000s, like I did, and you end up with a few $1 million, like I did. Well, that doesn't mean you can't screw up. You can, and in fact, most people do. That's also the history of this. MCSNet was, in fact, the third attempt at this. Not the first. Now, of course, it was the first in the internet space, but there was no internet when MCSNet started. The previous incantation was one that I voluntarily shut down. We were doing PCs and service for companies around the Chicagoland area, myself and a partner. And ultimately, as the PC universe expanded and the rate of productivity enhancement that we were able to get in that space and in that market started to dissipate, the company's growth became less and less profitable, became less and less likely that we would find some grand innovation and be able to make that $1 million. And eventually, the risk that we would not only not make the $1 million, but that we'd suffer enough losses that we'd go out of business, got high enough that we both kind of bagged it and said, all right, we're done, and we shut the place down. So what's happened here with monetary policy and negative interest rates? Well, negative interest rates are extraordinarily pernicious, folks, because the thing about both incantations of MCSNet First one was just plain MCS, Macro Computer Solutions. The thing that's pernicious about them is that it destroys the ability to do this with your own capital because you can't amass any. You can't save any. Think about this, folks. You go to work every day. Let's say that you work a job. You work for somebody else. And you make $2,000 a month doing this. Fairly pedestrian sort of job. By the way, that's not as terrible as it sounds. Okay, if you get 40 hours a week, 5 weeks is 200. It's a little over $10 an hour, because there's not always 5 weeks in a month, right? So you're talking about a fairly low end job, but not a ridiculously low end job. And let's say that it costs you $18,000 a year to live, but you have 20. We're going to leave taxes out of this, although that, of course, is never the case. So you have $2,000. Now, that's excess of your requirements. That is your economic surplus. That is the amount of money that you are capable of earning, the productivity that you put into the economy, minus what you must spend in order to have a place to live, water, food, a toilet so you can take a crap, all of those things. All right. And so your personal economic surplus is $2,000 a year. All right. So over 10 years, you should be able to, you'd think, take that $2,000 and stick it in your pocket. And then after 10 years, take a year off. Well, you can't do that because of this thing called inflation. But here's the really ugly part, folks. Productivity growth historically is about 2% a year. Okay, now, the thing about exponents is that it works both directions. Okay, so what does this really mean? Well, it means that $20,000 that you amassed shouldn't be good for 1 year. It should be good for about 14 months. Maybe a little more. Maybe 15 months. Now, wait a minute. You say, how's that happen? Well, because every year, you're supposed to be able to do more with less. That's what productivity is. Now, take this over the space of 40 years. All right, let's just say for the sake of argument that you're able to sock back 10%. 10%. In other words, you're able to run an economic surplus, personal economic surplus, where you only need 90% of what you earn, and the rest you can stick somewhere. You do absolutely nothing with it. All right, absolutely nothing with it at all. And so you are able to do that, and you have a 2% productivity growth rate. That's all. Just 2%. All right? So what happens? Well, you start out, let's say that this is $2,000, right? And you have a $20,000 economic earning requirement. So over 40 years, you amass 80 grand. But the productivity improvement means that it's worth 2.21 times as much. Well, wait a minute now. That's what, $160 some thousand dollars and a little more? Well, that's 8 years. If you retire at 65, you should be able to live to 72 without earning anything, just by spending the cash. Can you do that today? No. You cannot. Why? Because the government, through its policies, and folks, don't blame the Federal Reserve for this because Congress controls the Fed. Blame our political process for this. You can't do it. If you try to, quote unquote, invest in the stock market and you catch it wrong and there's a crash, you have nothing. Your so-called nest egg gets wiped out. Your cost of living goes up instead of down. What has been the increase in the cost of medical care over the last 10 years? How about 20 years? It used to be that you could have a child in the 1960s for about $100 in a hospital. You take that and you run the inflation rate on it, the so-called official inflation rate, you should be able to walk into a hospital today and have a child for $1,000. Now that's with the so-called official inflation rate. Where? Can somebody tell me where that can ever happen? It of course cannot in today's society. And yet, the way that people get pregnant and then give birth hasn't changed a bit in a million years. Oh, yeah, when things go wrong, it of course changes. But I'm not talking about when things go wrong. I'm talking about the average, ordinary, vaginal, normal childbirth. Can you have a bunch of doctors and hospitals and nurses that jack up what happens so that it gets a whole lot more expensive than it used to be? Yeah, you sure can. And we have. But absent all of that, are you still going to give birth exactly the same way that the first humans gave? You betcha you are. Because physiologically it hasn't changed a bit. Take a look at everything else around you, folks. What happens when you make it, when you drive down interest rates and you do this? Well, what you do is you make saving capital, because of the hidden inflation and everything, you make saving capital to start businesses and build businesses impossible. Well, think about that. It's impossible. So what do you have to do? You have to borrow money. From whom? From the very people who made it happen. You think this is some faceless machine? It is not. What is centralized control of production and the choices of economics, folks? What is that called? It is called communism. What economic system do we have in the United States today when you cannot fund an enterprise, large or small, with accumulated capital because the government intentionally steals it and forces you to enslave yourself on a forward basis, and then they decide through this very same cabal exactly what gets funded, who gets funded, and on what terms? That is communism. We do not have a capitalist economic system in the United States today. We have a communist economic system in the United States today. President Trump, screaming for more rate cuts, is a communist. Barack Obama and his TARP and all the things that went along with it. And by the way, not just Barack Obama, remember, George Bush too, right? Both of them. Both communists. You think I'm joking? I'm sure you do. I'm sure some of you, you're shaking your head. You're going, oh, no, it's the free market. They're the freest people in the world. Really? Is that so? So if I go out and I earn $1,000 today, am I going to have $1,000 worth of purchasing power in 10 years? No, I am not. As measured by today's prices. And the government is going to do everything they can to steal it. If I own a house, guess what? They're going to steal 1% or maybe 2% of the value of that property every single year in the form of property taxes. Well, what if I don't own a house? Let's say I rent. Oh, well, gee, what do you think the landlord pays? He pays property taxes. Guess who pays the property taxes? I do when I pay the rent. If I and by the way, I haven't paid for food, electricity, water, sewer. I haven't paid for anything yet. Just because I bought something. You have an automobile. That's yours, right? Well, not so much. Some states are crazy enough to actually impose a tax on the value of the automobile, and they all will force you to buy insurance, which is a cartel. A cartel that, by the way, did get an exemption from antitrust law. Yeah, that's called McCarran-Ferguson. That, by the way, has been found not to apply to the medical and insurance business. But in the automobile insurance business, it's why there was one database that has every violation, every moving thing that you've ever done, and all the other history on your insurance claims. It's all in one place, and all the insurance companies can use it and collude to set your price. That normally would be illegal. In the medical world, we do the same thing, except in the medical world, it is illegal. It's been illegal for over 100 years. And yet they do it all the time. No one goes to jail, ever, even though facially this is a felony. It's been a felony for over 100 years. 15 United States Code, Chapter 1. We do not live in a capitalist society, folks. We do not live within a capitalist economic system. The word for what we live on today, right now, right here, is communism. You won't admit it, and you sure as hell won't do anything about it. You should. After all, we kind of sort of said we're going to go to war over that a couple times, didn't we? War, real war. Guns, bombs, planes, soldiers. We became what we said we hated. It was a scam. It still is. So, what happens in communism? Well, you look at the Soviet Union. Yes, comrade, you may have your bread. Unfortunately, there isn't any on the shelf. The reason there isn't any on the shelf is because people eventually realize that there is no way to win this game. Not through hard work. You have to buy your way in somewhere, or you have to catch somebody buggering a boy and threaten them, or screwing a 14-year-old girl. And if you blackmail them, boy, oh boy, you can make a whole lot of money. If you're in Congress, you can make a whole lot of money. But if you're an ordinary person who just wants to go to work, amass some capital, and then open up a business somewhere. And by the way, guys, again, let me go back to what I said originally about MCS, because every single business person, every single entrepreneur thinks of this exactly the same way. It is not what you can sell something for today and how much money you think you're going to make right now. It is that the gains in productivity, which are supposed to be yours, and you're staying ahead of that through your own guile and ability, means that you are going to be able to do more with less, and that will grow the company, grow the sales side, grow the profits, and make you more wealthy. Every single entrepreneur, that's what they're trying to do. And today, unless you steal or borrow, which puts you under the control of the person who loaned you the money. By the way, that's exactly what communism is. Central control, control by someone else. You can't make it happen. Contemplate that, folks. I think it's time for the adult beverage.